Hi, I'm Sam Bass, editor of Skiing Magazine. I'm about to read you White Rose, a story about skiing in Antarctica. Chapter 1. Reckoning. Have you ever seen a big man cry? I have. I don't mean the times I saw my dad cry when his knee used to lock up from an old ski jumping injury, or the time I saw Hulk Hogan cry on his reality show a few years ago. I'm talking about a guy standing 15 feet away from me who's under serious and justifiable emotional distress. He's not sobbing or anything, just tearing up a bit. He's actually holding it together pretty well, considering. We're in the dining hall of a 295-foot, 33-year-old Yugoslavian-built cruise ship tied to a pier in Ushuaia, Argentina. The guy is 6'1", 210 pounds, and packed with muscle. From my seat, I can see the moisture in his red-rimmed eyes reflecting the dining hall's track lighting. I hear his soft voice crack ever so slightly under the weight of the message he's delivering to the 80 or so astonished skiers in front of him. He's Doug Staup, and we followed him here to ski in Antarctica. It's late October of 2008, the beginning of the southern summer. We've come from Scandinavia, Italy, Britain, France, and North America to this town of 64,000 in the Argentine province of Tierra del Fuego. We are to board the Lubov Orlova and embark on a 3-day crossing of the notoriously rough Drake Passage to the Antarctic Peninsula, where the Andes re-emerge dramatically from the Southern Ocean. The 295-foot Orlova is one of a fleet of nimble ex-Soviet cruise ships run by Polar Tour operator Quark Expeditions. Quark's typical clientele is wealthy blue hairs on penguin and iceberg tours, but Staup, a veteran polar adventurer, guide, and global explorer, has come up with a novel idea, filling a Quark ship with skiers and conducting a ship-based ski journey to the peninsula's west coast. It's the first ever attempt to bring a large group of skiers to Antarctica. There are no ski resorts in Antarctica. The entire 5.4 million square mile continent sports only 4,000 people scattered among 30 scientific research bases. We won't have snowmobiles or helicopters. We'll hike or skin to earn every turn. It was flip-flop season back in Colorado, and I hadn't skied since breaking my back in a ski accident 10 months before, so I was happy to arrive in Ushuaia a few days early in order to ski some warm-up runs with my shipmates on the Marshall Glacier above town. Hugging the sides of huge peaks rising from the sea, Ushuaia is like a coastal Alaska town, except people speak Spanish. My group's guide is Andrew McLean, the accomplished American ski mountaineer. While we climbed the Marshall, the guy on the rope in front of me, a former Army captain and Iraq vet named Scott Fennell, turned around to marvel. I bubbled, "Isn't this incredible?" He grinned. "I'm just happy to be skiing with Andrew McLean," he said, "the Tom Brady of ski mountaineering." That evening I scarfed seafood and raised a toast with Squaw Valley skiers Kip Garr and Ingrid Backstrom when we spotted the Orlova in the distance, steaming down the Beagle Channel toward town, a toy boat glowing in the evening sun. Our ship was coming in. We would soon leave for Antarctica, a place where few had ever skied. Only we wouldn't. We've been on board, waiting at the pier for 4 days, when we're summoned to the dining hall for an update on the status of some mechanical issues that have stricken the Orlova. A short, bearded Russian crewman stands next to Staup. It's he who breaks the news. "Our engineer is unable to fix ship. I am sorry to say trip is canceled." Staup speaks, his face flushed red. "This is breaking my heart." Chapter 2. Landfall. Fast forward 13 months. I'm setting boots on a new continent, Antarctica. Bam! Plastic to rock. My boots scrape on the black beach cobbles like hooves on pavement. 8 of us unload packs, skis, and poles from the Zodiac. Kevin Quinn, our group's big, affable alpha dog guide, is shouting, "Antarctica, baby!" with unhinged glee. He's bear-hugging anyone within range like a football coach on mushrooms. Standing sun-drenched under blue sky with a vast glacier behind us, we watch the Zodiac speed away. Quinn turns to me, holding a satellite phone. "Want to call your family?" he asks. Soon I've got my 5-year-old son on the line. I imagine him telling his kindergarten buds that Dad called him from Antarctica. The previous October, in the Orlova's dining hall, Stout promised we would make it. After leaving that fateful assembly, but before the Quark folks opened the ship's bar for pro bono apology beers, I cornered Stout on a gangway. After one is forced to cancel the trip of a lifetime for 80 people who've just flown halfway around the globe, what does one do? "I'm going to have to take out $250,000 in loans to pay people back," he admitted. "But I promise you I will make this trip happen." In the ensuing months, Staup's business, Isaac's Expeditions, reimbursed those who couldn't make the second attempt, made amends with Quark, and secured the nicest ship in Quark's fleet, the recently upgraded Clipper Adventurer, sister ship of the Orlova, for our return visit. The dining hall scene had been remarkably subdued. Disbelief steamed from the crowd, but any hard feeling seemed directed more at the general situation than at Doug. I think it was because we were all skiers. We had been on logistically complicated trips before and understood that exigencies arise. And most of the skiers had a personal connection to Staup. News of his plan to stuff a cruise ship with skiers had circulated through Squaw Valley, where he makes his home, and among veterans of past Staup expeditions. "I think every bro in Squaw is on that trip," said a gear manufacturer I spoke with before the first attempt. He was right about both trips, the failed attempt and the one now coming to fruition. Nearly everyone seems to know one another. A British pharmacy worker and I are among the only ones meeting nearly everyone for the first time. She won the trip in a bottle cap contest from the cokes she drank to stay awake during her long night shifts. 20 of the passengers are guides, working only for the opportunity to ski in Antarctica. And most of them work for Points North Heli Adventures in Alaska, a company owned by Quinn. Quinn signed on as the field boss for the first trip, functioning as the guide's den mother. He's back for the return trip in the same role. Right now, that den mother is wiping the sweat off my right heel with the inside of his shearling work glove so I can apply a patch of duct tape to a would-be blister. "How's that for guide service?" he asks. Huh? Our group has just ascended a 600-foot-high ridge between 2 large bays and is snacking on cured meat. Above, we met 2 skiers who had arrived on the 60-foot chartered Australian yacht Spirit of Sydney. "Odd spot to meet other skiers," one remarked. "Sure is," we said. "How many skiers on board the Spirit?" "Just the 2 of us." "How many with you?" "About 80. Jaws dropped. Fortified and freshly taped, I skin with my cohorts to the base of a black rock buttress. The temperature is about 25 degrees, warmer than I expected, and the snow is a challenging mix of wind-scalloped chalk and breakable crust. Around the corner, a group led by Glenn Poulsen is booting up a short, narrow chute. Though it doesn't hold much snow, a swath of bare talus stripes the center. It seems like a reasonable first Antarctic chute to bag, so with Quinner's approval, I follow them up. One by one we drop. Steve from Jackson Hole, Scott the Army captain from Maine via Alaska, Tumas from Salt Lake City, Kelly from Alaska's North Slope, then me, then Poulsen. 20 scratchy, gravelly hop turns later, we gather at the chute's mouth and gawk. Not at the forgettable conditions, but at our whereabouts. An endless glacier, flanked by tumbling peaks and striated with neon blue crevasses toward its calving sea end, blurs into the far right horizon. Sierra Cove twinkles below, deep blue and streaked with brash ice and a few massive tabular bergs. Our ship, 295 foot and able to comfortably house more than 100 guests, is dwarfed. We meander down and strike gold near the Zodiac pickup, slicing turns through soft corn to the water's edge. Come evening, we sit down to a 5-course dinner in a luxurious dining hall. Moments before, we were sweaty, salt-crusted dirtbags. Now, having showered in tidy, varnished wood cabins and hit the forward lounge bar, we dine while evening light bathes the peaks and bergs. For repeat passengers who, during the previous year's pier-bound days, ogled the Orlova's gorgeous Russian waitresses under the hallucinatory effects of motion sickness medicine, the all-male waitstaff is a minor letdown. But after the waiters break out a guitar and regale us with tableside tunes, most are Filipino, a musical culture. Those Russian babes are dead to us.
Welcome back to Battledome, where challengers Anthony Freeman and Douglas Stout are about to fight it out for tonight's championship. Well, since Douglas Stout is behind in points, he'll have to knock Anthony Freeman out of the ring and onto the floor to become today's champion. If Anthony can stay up on that platform for 60 seconds, he'll take home the $1,000 purse, a Battledome champion ring, and tonight's title.
Ready? Back off. Yes, here we go. Right now, step off. Ready? Get!
Freeman's got him down. Freeman's got him in trouble. Stout's in trouble, but now he throws him over and it's done. Freeman's off. See ya, baby.
You had it pegged, and the winner is Douglas Stout out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He is our Challenger King.
Upper body just picked him up, threw him all the way over and off. And he's styling and profiling now inside the dome.
Douglas Stout.
Chapter 3, Malibu Doug. Stout's first Antarctic experience was on the set of a film that took place in Antarctica, but was actually filmed in 105-degree Valencia, California. He played Lieutenant Baines, a U.S. military officer turned demon, in the 1998 Stephen King horror flick, Sometimes They Come Back for More. I ended up getting shish kebabbed by a harpoon, he recalls, but it was cool foreshadowing, and sometimes I still get royalty checks. Raised outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Stout learned to ski at nearby Round Top Ski Area. A former NCAA Division I and then professional soccer player, he eventually ended up in Malibu, California, where he parlayed his soccer skills and good looks into commercial acting. He was busy in SoCal, UCLA Film School, more than 80 commercial appearances, an assistant cameraman gig on Madonna's 1993 film Dangerous Game, a championship title on the American Gladiator-esque TV show Battledome,
Battledome champion of the world,
even a role on Baywatch in the pre-Pamela Anderson era. I was the guy who'd be on the jet ski, Stout says. I'd jump off, save the hot chick, drag her to the beach, and then David Hasselhoff would come in, push me away, and do mouth-to-mouth. On the Baywatch set, he earned the nickname Malibu Doug. He discovered he could earn enough in a month of commercials to fund several months of playing, surfing in Bali, mountaineering in New Zealand, trekking in some far-off land. In 1999, he visited Antarctica for the first time, notching the first snowboard descent of 16,050-foot Mount Vinson, the continent's highest peak. Since 1999, he's made a total of 19 trips to Antarctica and numerous North Pole expeditions, often guiding clients. Early in his polar guiding career, he incorporated charity and education into his expeditions, using his trips to raise money for various causes and doing live uplinks from his expeditions to school classrooms. I didn't want to take people to these beautiful places just to take them there, he says. I wanted to have a greater purpose. You have to find creative ways to get kids to want to learn. Amazed at how engaged his student followers became, Stout started the Ice Axe Foundation to connect students with remote and imperiled parts of the planet. If Stout's uplinks made it easy for kids to glimpse Antarctica, it was no simple matter for him and his clients to get there. Antarctica is like a rose, he says. It's such a difficult place to get to. The logistics of doing so, the travel, the permits, the distance, the oceans, are the rosebush's thorns. But once you get there, it blossoms. The sparkling snow, the wildlife. I fell in love with the place right away.
Douglas Stoop is the Battle Dome champion. How did you do it?
Well, Anthony was a great competitor. He was really tough, but I ended up winning in the end.
Oh my gosh, we got a nice guy. Here you go, you deserve this right now. Maybe you can go home and tell your son Angelo how proud you really are.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Hey guys, here's the champ, back to you.
Chapter 4, Hotspot. Perhaps the thorniest subject involving the Antarctic Peninsula is global warming. According to climate records, the Antarctic Peninsula is one of 3 places on the planet that have seen the sharpest rise in temperatures in recent years. The other 2 are the Yukon's Mackenzie Basin and central eastern Siberia. Temperatures on the Antarctic Peninsula have risen 3 degrees centigrade since the 1970s, says Eugene Domak, a professor of environmental science at Hamilton College who has been conducting research in Antarctica for 5 decades. That's one of the fastest rates of temperature increase anywhere in the world, he says. A now famous hypothesis put forth by Susan Solomon, an atmospheric chemist for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, explains that much of the temperature increase seen in the peninsula is a result of ozone depletion, a human-induced process blamed widely on chlorofluorocarbons. Solomon's work led to a near-global ban on CFCs in 1987, but the polar ozone holes still exist, and peninsular warming, as part of the overall global warming trend, is only compounded by the constant addition of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. Domak, the Hamilton professor, is currently working on a project funded by the National Science Foundation that studies the effects of the breakup of the Larsen Ice Shelf system on the peninsula's east coast. Staup's group is skiing the northern part of the peninsula's west coast, but much of the Larsen system lies a mere 50 miles to the east. It's an exciting place to study in detail, Domak says, explaining that the unprecedented breakup of the Larsen system and consequent sediment deposition over the last 10 years has wreaked monumental havoc with seafloor ecosystems. In North America, we think of the effect of global warming in terms of pine trees retreating up into the mountains and deciduous forests moving to higher latitudes, he says. This shift in the marine ecosystem we've seen on the peninsula is of a much more fundamental nature. It's as if all the trees here in North America were suddenly replaced by giant mushrooms. One might question the wisdom of visiting such an ecologically dynamic and fragile place in diesel-burning cruise ships. And the young Antarctic tourism industry has grown explosively since Swedish-American Lars-Erik Lindblad led the first group of tourists there in 1966. When the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators began keeping records during 1992 and 93, a total of 6,704 seaborne and airborne tourists put ashore. By 2008-2009, that number had grown to 27,206. So why would an environmentally conscious outfitter like Staup bring such a large group to ski here? Yes, these trips have a huge carbon footprint, says Staup, so we have to make a difference in a way that makes sense. That's why my trips have the educational component. Those planes and ships will make the trip there whether or not my clients are on board. I want to be an ambassador for this beautiful place, and bring people there so they can be ambassadors too. Domak agrees. He doesn't think the tourism industry alone can generate a footprint large enough to adversely affect the peninsula's ecosystems. He explains that tourism is well regulated and that tour operators, who sell their trips as educational, environmentally respectful trips, are their own best policing agents, and the relatively high price of a cruise to Antarctica, coupled with the continent's remoteness, limits tourist numbers. I think that if it can be kept to a minimum, Domak says, the more people that see this beautiful continent, the better off we are as a global citizenry. So I'm all in favor of tourism. Hey, it's Sam Bass, November 2009. I'm skiing in Antarctica. Had a fabulous day. As you can see, I'm sharing it with a few of my friends. About 4,000 of my closest friends. Had 2 incredible runs today, steepest stuff I've ever skied in my life. Now I'm headed back to the ship, which is right here. So sayonara. Chapter 5. Wenke Island. I couldn't care less about the Gentoo penguin guano coating my skis and skins. I'm hunched against a rock above the steepest face I've ever considered skiing, and I just want to stash these skins and click in before I drop something or slip or faint. I'm with Poulsen's crew again, this time on Wenke Island, overlooking Dorian Bay. Across the Neumeier Channel, 9,052-foot Mount Francais, its summit nearly a mile above me, mocks me for feeling so anxious only 1,000 feet above the water. But this is some steep shit. The ship is tiny, but it looks like it's directly below me. And now Glenn, Steve, Scott, Tumas, and Kelly are below me, waiting for me to pull it together. I lose about 20 vertical feet with my first turn. The soft, edgeable snow is a relief, but then I ski into the shadow of a flanking cliff and nearly lose it on icy crust. Then I'm back in the sun again, fear washed away by relief, washed away by thrill at every linked turn. A round of howls and high fives, and we're off to the next objective. It's a long, sinuous, rock-pocked couloir, as steep as the face we just skied, but more nerve-wracking because falling would most certainly send me careering into rocks. We've donned crampons and carry ice axes. The slope is nearly in front of our faces as we climb. I can't find a good spot to strip my skins off safely, so I sink my axe and snow picket, clip into both, and dig a small shelf to make the transition. This time I can't relax until I'm standing alive at the bottom with Scott and Steve, and then I'm elated. Scott explains his theory of fun. Class 1 fun is fun while you're having it, he says. Class 2 fun isn't fun while you're having it, but fun when you think about it afterwards. Class 3 fun isn't fun while you're having it, and though there may be some positive memories, you quickly get overwhelmed by how sketchy it was. The first descent, I think to myself during the long traverse back to the Zodiac pickup near the Gentoo rookery, was Class 1 with a Class 2 transition. The second was Class 2 plus with a Class 3 transition. Passing penguin clicks and snoozing seals, we pull through pale pink guano to shore, where Scotsman Laurie Dexter, Quirk's expedition leader, picks us up. Back on board, we learn that a client in another group fell into a crevasse. His leg is badly broken, and he'll need to be evacuated. Our glee fades. This doesn't register anywhere on Scott's scale of fun. Chapter 6. The South Shetland Islands. It's midnight, and I'm standing with my pants down in the dimly lit ship's infirmary. We're anchored between Half Moon and Greenwich Islands in the South Shetland archipelago, about 200 miles northeast of Wenke Island and the Neumeier Channel. I have a curious case of balloon-like swelling in my lower right leg. It happened to my arm once during college. My chums nicknamed it steak arm, and mystified doctors told me it was likely an allergic reaction, only this time it's more like hippopotamus leg. 48 hours earlier, we were steaming north from Wenke Island to the South Shetlands, and while it must have sucked for the guy who broke his leg, it didn't screw up the trip. After we dropped him at a Chilean base to be evacuated by C-130 to Chile and eventually Rochester, New York, we skied a tasty 700-foot chute on King George Island above a Peruvian base called Machu Picchu, then a steep, quiet chute that felt like the roofless ruins of a cathedral and sheltered soft snow and a soaring tower of dark rock. When I joined Tumas at the water's edge, with a ship and a stegosaurus-shaped island in the distance, he was staring back up, slowly shaking his head, nearly crying with joyous disbelief. Then I got a funny feeling in my leg. 18 hours ago, when I awoke to prepare for a day of skiing on Livingston Island with the Warren Miller film crew, my leg was a thick tube of itchy, sore meat from mid-thigh to foot. Determined not to let it interfere with my chance to ski more in the South Shetlands, I stuffed it into a ski boot, cranked the buckles down, and set off in the Zodiac. By the time we returned to the ship 13 hours later, my distended calf had spilled out of my boot cuff, draping over the edge like batter in an overfilled muffin tin cup. Thinking seriously that it might explode, I've come to the infirmary. while I distract myself by reading the Swedish labels on the cabinet doors. Evidently, the previous ship's doctor was a Swede. A Colombian doctor with a Scottish name prepares a syringe of anti-inflammatory liquid to jab into my left buttock. Dr. Alex McLean, not to be confused with the Tom Brady of ski mountaineering, Andrew McLean, can't figure out what the problem is either and advises a series of tests when I return home. There's a quick pinch and I pull up my drawers. He hands me several envelopes of pills, also labeled in Swedish, explaining the dosage in Spanish-accented English. Chapter 7. Northward. We wake foggy-headed for our final ski day. As I stuff Mr. Hippo-Leg into his ski boot, images from the prior evening's raucous costume party in the forward lounge play in my head. A guide dressed as John McEnroe spanking a barely clothed Finn with a tennis racket. Snow White in authentic fairy tale garb. Another Finn, bearded and wearing nets on his head, chest, and thighs, grunting at a white-painted, curly-haired man in an ambiguously aboriginal getup. I'm with Glenn's group again, and we sweat ourselves healthy climbing and skiing Mount Plymouth, a 1,700-foot rimy knob on the northwestern shore of Discovery Bay on Greenwich Island. My leg is still swollen, but manageable, thanks to Dr. McLean. After lunch, Staup himself steers us ashore in the Zodiac, dropping us next to a crew of Chilean longshoremen offloading supplies at the Arturo Prat base, a small cluster of orange buildings beneath 900-foot Lopez Nunatak Peak. Our shipmates Jeremy Jones and Xavier De La Rue, the big mountain snowboard icons, are already returning to the ship in another Zodiac. "It's all about the corn!" Jeremy yells as they pull away. We spend our final on-ski hours on the sunny flanks of Lopez Nunatak, milking each creamy turn until the Zodiac returns. The ship weighs anchor and heads north through the English Strait with the outgoing tide, its bow steamrolling enormous standing waves. The Achu Islands' black spires and twisted pyramids pepper the strait's northern mouth, the scattered fossil teeth of some prehistoric dog. They melt behind the stern and we head north into the Drake, hoping for smooth passage. Just before 8 the next morning, Laurie's voice summons us to the deck to see something most of us only read about in grade school. We gather on the top deck, speaking in hushed tones. Just off the bow, almost within spitting distance, rise the wave-slapped rocks of Cabo de Hornos, Cape Horn. More than 800 ships and 10,000 souls have been lost to this legendary patch of water. But on this calm morning, I just scratch my right leg and stare.